Yes, sir. IRL Quest. We back.
Episode 8, bro. We're
Episode 8.
smosing through here, bro.
Episode 8. Having a lot of fun. How you doing,
All day.
Eric?
Doing all right, bro. Can't complain. What about you, man? Tell me a little
So
bit about your day, dog.
it's a Wednesday, bro. It's been chilling since the last time we've been on. Just doing the same old stuff, working out,
Well,
meditating.
dude, I told you about my back thing yesterday, right?
Yeah, what's going on with that, bro? Let
Dude,
the viewers know, bro.
I got like injections like nonstop into my lower back. The from that car accident I mentioned in a previous episode, I went to a spine therapist or specialist, excuse me. And they were like, "Yo, you're still feeling this after 3 months? That's not normal. Like you've been to therapy for like chiropractor. I've been doing it for months, and I'm still feeling it. It still hurts when I bend down. So they gave me a steroid and injected into my lower back.
Yep.
And let me tell you, they were downplaying the fuck out of this. Like they were like, "Oh yeah, it's gonna be a little pinch of the nerve. Yeah, it's not gonna hurt too bad. Nothing worse than what you're already experiencing." Nope, didn't happen like that. It felt like they were probing me, and they were shifting the needle because that hit different spots of the spine,
Facts.
and you feel every movement. There's no there's no painkillers. They don't put you under. You're all awake and you're just feeling it. It's pretty rough, man.
Yeah, that's rough, bro. So you were
I'm
getting
so
kind of like
bruised.
steroid injections in your lower back to help with the pain.
Yeah,
Probably
man.
because you have some inflammation in the area, and so
Yeah.
that's rough, man. Well, hopefully you feel better. You can get through it.
Dude,
Are you still able to work out and stuff?
I have to wait until I feel better at least. The one thing I did notice off the bat is even though I'm extremely sore, the type of pain is completely different. So like when I would normally like pre-operation, pre-needle in my back, it would be like a tightness. Now it's a soreness instead. So I don't feel the tightness anymore, which is very promising. Very promising.
Hey, you guys see if you see a little improvement, just run with it, bro.
That's one day at a time, little improvement day over day. That's what I'm looking at.
That's what we want to see. So, welcome everyone to another episode of the IRL Quest podcast. Today we have an interesting subject that we're going to dive deep into, which is basically the role of mentors, mentorship, basically leadership that you have in your life, people who you look up to, people who have guided you throughout your life that, or that still guide you throughout your life that provide a ton of value to you in terms of like you've learned great lessons or about how to do things, people who have come before you, those smarter than us. We can always learn from everyone. It's what I believe. You know, Dr. Peterson, he says, who's a great mentor, he says, everyone has something to teach you, and if they don't have something that you can directly learn from them in terms of gain knowledge, you can at least learn what not to do, So there's always a teaching lesson in every person you encounter, which I find incredibly interesting. Before I heard that, I mean, that to me, it was like, well, what does someone who's maybe extremely disconnected from me have to teach me about, my life? What does someone who lived 2,000 years ago have to teach me about, things that are today? And when you dig deep into it and you read history and you study history, you realize that, man, there's nothing new under the sun. Things have always happened. They will continue to happen. There's new technologies and stuff like that. There's a couple of novel stuff, but ultimately, on a macro level, humans are the way humans have been for generations, right? For thousands of years. And so we can take at the core level lessons and teachings from those who have come before us, apply it to our lives today, and go forward with that. So that's what today's episode is going to be about. We're going to talk about a couple of mentors that have been helpful for us, and how maybe you can start applying some of these things that these people teach. Maybe you can pick up on some of them and apply it to your lives as well. So during this episode, of course, I think that it will be great for, of course, you should watch the episode, but also look up the people that we're talking about. I'm going to show some of their stuff as well as we're discussing it. We'll pull it up on the stream, but you should follow up on it. If you find that this is something that could potentially benefit you, something interesting to look into, I highly recommend it. Right. And you can always hit either of us up with questions, and we're happy to always help. So,
yep, we got chat open. If you guys want to send a message throughout the episode, feel free, and we'll try to catch it as soon as possible.
Perfect. All right. So let's start, Eric. I'm going to talk about the first mentor Well, first, I guess let's touch about mentorship in general. What do you think
Yeah.
about, learning? Because normally the first people who you have in your life, I think, that you see as like learning less, that you see as people that teach you things, right, are
Hmm.
typically teachers in school. Let's say in the West, right? You see teachers in school teaching you things about like math, science, whatever. Those are like that's like your first introduction into like, oh, this person knows more than me about a lot, and they're able to impart their knowledge onto me, right? And I'm actively learning. But so, what do you think about the concept of mentorship? How it can be beneficial? What are your thoughts on that?
Um, to start it off with, I think that for some people, mentorship is fully utilized, while for others, it is not even looked upon. And I think that's sort of like the gray area with this whole subject is trying to differentiate between mentorship and coaching and a teacher and a leader because they could technically fall under all of it. I'm sure most people have had teachers throughout their life, whether it's a school teacher or a coach or whatever it is. But for me, mentorship is a little bit more rounded than that in terms of like, not only are they in the place to teach, but you're absorbing the content and applying it to your life as well. So like I've had teachers where I just zone out of. I don't even pay attention to them in like middle school, high school. I don't call that a mentor. But like for example, I had a high school teacher, and I believe her name was Mrs. DePreez or something like that. Dude, it's been so long. It's been over 10 years. It was ninth grade. I just moved from New York to Miami, and I because of the way the school systems work, I've never taken the FCAT before. People from
Yep.
Florida will for sure know what FCAT is. It's our standardized testing
I
that
don't
we
know if
have
they do
every
that
year.
anymore, but
They
back in
don't
the
do.
day, we used to have
Yeah,
FCATs.
I think they stopped it like 2015 or 2016, somewhere around there. But back in the day, we had these standardized testing. And because I'm from New York, where we didn't have that, they pretty much placed us in remedial courses, no matter what our grade point average was beforehand. They did this prior little assessment. And if you didn't hit like above a 90% on the test, they put you into like intermediate reading and intermediate math.
Okay.
And I was like bummed, bro. I'm like, damn, two of my classes, I'm about to waste learning some bullshit that I already know. New York school system in general is a little bit more advanced in terms of speed. It's like I was learning ninth grade content in Miami and like seventh grade in New York. But more
Okay.
specifically, so realistically, I'm going into there knowing most of the content, but the teacher, Mrs. DePreez, was a unit, bro. She was the nicest person I've ever met in my life. She would take time to listen to your concerns. Like, no matter what she had going on her plate, she would always be there to answer the simple questions or the complex questions. She was the first teacher that would go up straight to me and be like, Eric, I truly don't know that answer. Maybe we could look it up together and we could come to a conclusion. And that's never happened to me before from a kid to a teacher standpoint. Like I was always talked down to. And now I guess because I was getting older, like and I was starting to ask these more complex questions, like these like Mrs. DePreez was really on top of that. And like it got to the point where she knew like I knew the basic materials. It was really easy courses. To where she truly, I mean, I don't want to get her in trouble. I don't think she still teaches, but she would like let me go to the side of the class and work on like a different assignment for a different course because she knew like I didn't even have to study for the exam and I'd get 100 on it or like a 90 something. And then she instilled this like I'm going on a tangent, but she instilled these like ideologies of like not following the status quo. So like she had these issues with like the school administration on like how she wanted to teach her course, and she would literally be like, "Fuck it, bro! Like I'm gonna run it my way. My kids aren't gonna rat me out because I'm doing it for them even more so than for myself." And so one of those things was like she took us to see Twilight when it first came out in the movie theaters because we were reading the book, and
There
she
you go.
didn't get approval to actually take the kids out right away or whatever. So she created her own document that she had us kids take to our parents and get the approval. And you know what? If the school system then like turned on her and said like, "Hey, you weren't supposed to do that," she was like, "Well, I got approval from every single parent that the kids went to." You know what I mean? Like she had her bases covered, and she went around the formula that the school system provided her. And so I really opened my mind to the idea of like, hey, not everything you have to follow to a T.
Yeah.
What about you? What about you, man? Like, do you feel like mentors are different than teachers?
I think they play. It could be the same, because a teacher. I think all teachers. I think all mentors are teachers, but not all teachers are mentors.
Agreed. Agreed.
Because a teacher can teach you something. Their job is to impart some sort of knowledge onto you.
Mm-hmm.
A mentor is more guiding, is more imparting knowledge, guiding you in terms of, I would say, more not necessarily knowledge specific where they test your knowledge and you have to pass a course or something like that. It's more rounded in like issues, personal issues that you're having, or issues with solving problems in your life that are not necessarily just doing a coursework or something like that, or learning a specific subject. I think mentors is more like guiding you through life and how to live a good life and good things to do in your life, you know, principles to follow, virtues to strive for. I think that's more on the mentorship side, because Google could be your teacher about how to do something. Google will teach you how to do something, right? But you're not gonna. Google's not a mentor guiding you through life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think mentorship is a level higher than teacher, right? And of course, it's not mutually exclusive. Some great mentors are great teachers, but some teachers doesn't necessarily have to be a mentor. So I think that's how it is, right?
That it's interesting because if you said it point blank, right? Like if someone is talking to me about their teacher, I probably wouldn't give much credence to it. But if someone is like, "Yo, by the way, Eric, like I've been working with my mentor recently," I'll be like, "Damn, you got a fucking mentor?" I'm like, "What are you guys working on?" Like that
100%.
holds a lot more power, which I agree with your statement that they could be collated, but mentor to me is a little bit higher of a tier.
100%. And I wanted to actually ask you something. Do you think, like, because to me, mentorship isn't necessarily from, people who you know personally, people who you've personally met. It could just be books, reading from history, people who have lived years, many years before you that are no longer with us today. They can teach us a lot about, just through their lessons, through their life, how they live their lives, the ways that what we can do in our lives to live happy, fulfilling lives, which is ultimately the goal, right? That's the whole point of the IRO quest, to live a happy, fulfilling life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and accomplish everything you want to accomplish, right? And there's many facets to that, and so there's a lot of people who can guide you on the right path to do those things based on how they live their lives. So, for example, for me, one of my biggest mentors is Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who lived thousands of years ago, during the Antonine Plague era, right? And this guy, of course, not someone you meet, right? Because they're 2,000 years ago.
Of
Um,
course.
but through his teachings, through his writings, and things that have lived and what people have said about him, and things that live on from him through his legacy, he can serve as a mentor to many people, and he does serve as a mentor to many people about, in terms of, important lessons that I'm gonna mention, I'm gonna talk about. But that's a great example. So do you think that, like, who do you have any specific people that you can think of other than, of course, Mrs.
The priest.
Dupree,
The priest. It was, I think it was French, maybe, possibly.
Mrs. Dupree's? Um, do you have any kind of mentors in terms of people that you look up to, not just, but because maybe they were a great teacher to you, but people
Yeah.
who you try to strive and emulate to a certain extent,
Yeah. So I
who
have
you take lessons from on how you can be better yourself?
yeah, so I have like genres of mentors. So like for example, the first one I'm gonna mention, and then we could go dig a little deeper onto them. But I like to categorize this mentorship as like comedians. And there's a few comedians that's hit that mark for me of like mentorship. The first one is Robin Williams. I think the way he's conducted his life, the way he's always inspiring people to laugh, um, choosing to always put his best foot forward no matter what his mental condition was, because he suffered greatly from depression and I'm sure anxiety. Um, and the way how through all that his main goal was to make people laugh and to inspire others and to entertain through his movies, right? That to me is like something I strive for every day. And another comedian that is on the same tier is Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle, I know we had an episode about him recently, talking
Yeah,
about
we
the
talked
whole,
about him. Yeah.
yeah, but he has like the way he conducts himself, the way he speaks, the way he calculates his, like he's like one of those people who I think has studied like Buddhism and has like this serene ability to like stay calm and calculated. And dude, that is so impressive, bro. Like he gets emotional, he gets upset. Like he had one of the stand-up specials. He was very emotional, but that was planned. Like that was part of what he was trying to express with that stand-up special. But 9 times out of 10, he's like on his shit. No one can affect his mindset. No one can tell him what to do because he's gonna follow his own way. And that's why I have like a genre of comedians as like role models, because each of them do something a little bit different that I take inspiration from.
Yeah. It's a great point. Yeah, I think it's different for everyone. It's not necessarily specific people. Could also be just, genres of people that you kind of take inspiration from. We actually have a comment on the stream. Let's see who. Yo, Adrian Vasquez, what's up, boy?
Yo,
How you doing?
yo, Adrian,
Another day,
what?
another pod.
Yo, Adrian, if you're still there, hit us up when you can with your number one role model, bro.
Yeah, let us know, bro.
Let
What
us,
do you look up to?
but go ahead, Leroy. Go ahead and go into a little more detail on your boy Marcus.
So Marcus, guys, let me tell you a little bit about Marcus, right? Marcus's story, okay? Marcus Aurelius was born many, many years ago, over 2,000 years ago, right? I don't know the exact date. Actually, let me pull him up here. I'll just pull up his Wikipedia real quick.
I believe he was born in do the glasses shit. April 26th, 121 AD.
This guy, this guy is the GOAT in many ways. So I'm going to pull him up right here so everyone can see.
You probably won't see him. You'll probably see a statue.
Oh, yeah. I don't think they had photo pictures back then.
Pull them up real quick.
So, guys, Marcus Aurelius, right? Marcus Aurelius Antonius, born April 26th, the year 121 AD, right? Was Roman emperor from 161 to 180 and a Stoic philosopher. He was the last of the rulers known as the Five Good Emperors, a term coined by Machiavelli. The last emperor of the Pax Romana and an age of relative peace and stability for the Roman Empire, lasting from 27 BCE to 180 CE. He served as Roman consul in 140, 145, 161. So let's talk a little bit about Marcus and his life story, okay? His family origins, his childhood. Marcus, of course, you know him as the Roman emperor. We know him today as Roman emperor. But Marcus was not born for the throne, okay? A lot of people, think about succession, the child of the emperor becomes. That's not how it really was back in Rome, right? Sometimes it would be that way. Sometimes it wouldn't. So in Marcus's case, he was just born into a good family, of course. We can talk a little bit about his childhood here. The adopted family of Marcus was Roman Italo-Gallic origins, the genus Aurelia, into which Marcus was adopted at the age of 17. So Marcus's paternal family was from Rome, the Hispanic origins, Italo-Hispanic origins. His father was Marcus Verus. Basically, okay, he was born to a family, and then he was actually adopted into what would then become like the imperial family. Essentially, he was from childhood. He was picked to one day be emperor. So he was trained from childhood to eventually come up to be emperor. And that is a massive thing, right? Especially as a kid. You just imagine as a kid, you're selected, you're tapped to one day lead the biggest and the greatest empire the world had ever seen at that point, right? To be the most powerful person in history, essentially, up to that point. And so that, I mean, do you understand the concept? A lot of people talk about like absolute power corrupts absolutely, where people are good until they get the ability to be bad, and then they just like whatever, they do whatever they want. That is the case in a lot of throughout history with especially a lot of these Roman emperors. There were a lot of them that were pretty much scumbags, right? But Marcus is incredibly unique in that not only was he chosen to be emperor at a young age and groomed and taught, he, upon reaching the throne, right? Because he's trained with he's got a brother, okay? As they grow up, he's got a brother who's also being groomed, and the two of them come up together, right? Him and it's not even his blood brother; it's an adopted brother, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're training together to one day one of them will lead the empire, and bro, he gets to they get to adulthood and they're about to be tapped, and so Marcus is chosen to be emperor, right? Bro, Marcus never wanted to be emperor, so that's one. The guy didn't want to be emperor. Actually, apparently he would cry himself to sleep. You know, because he understood that the duties and the responsibilities were going to be immense. He didn't want to do that until one day, as the story goes, he had a dream where he saw like basically like I think like a bird came down and covered his shoulders in purple ivory, which is like the imperial colors. And so then
Mm-hmm.
he understood that he was meant for it and he was ready for it. And from then on, you know,
He pushed for it.
he pushed for it, right? So when Marcus is chosen to be emperor, the first thing he does, right? His first action, now he's the most powerful man in the in the world, right? The first thing he does is he names his brother co-emperor, bro.
Wow.
That's
What a
his first
fucking
action.
beast.
The first action he takes as the most powerful man in the world is he gives up half of it. The first thing he does with all the power in the world, he gives up half of it to his brother, bro.
Whew.
So let's just talk about that for a second, right? How many people, when they're in leadership positions, you know, when they have all the power, how many people do you think would just literally give half of it off, right? I mean, even when we talk about the government today, you know, the US government, bro, every time a new government program's created, it's there forever, right? Even if they say it's temporary, it's very hard to go back. You know, how many people are actually willing to share that level of responsibility and power? They just give it up, right? It's not all concentrated in one person. This guy is the strongest person in the history of the planet. He could literally, you know, immediately kill off like so many other emperors and people do, you know, destroy whoever's in his way or whatever, and set himself up to rule forever, right? But the first thing he does is he gives up half of his power to his brother who he was raised with. That is an incredible show of character, right? So what do you think about that?
Dude, so to me, what I've gotten out of like expressing my own mentorship and yours is that what I've come to realize is that it's really the framework in which they teach you, right? So I mentioned earlier about the pre-story and how she changed the framework for me in terms of like how to look at life a little bit differently when it comes to rules and regulation. This story that you're telling about Marcus is singing a lot of the same tunes in terms of like he gets into power. And obviously there's a lot of coincidences and good fortune that gets him to where he was. He got picked from a different family to be inherited into the imperial family, and he was pretty much groomed from a young age to become this person, right? But from what I understand from this story that you're telling me, it seems like he had the ability to do whatever he wanted. Once you get that seat, you are just that powerful. And he could have stuck to the quat or the status quo or the quo. But he didn't. He didn't. He changed the rules. I'm assuming this is the first time that there was a co-emperor, right?
I don't know if it was the first time that there was co-emperors because I know at some point, you know, during Roman history there was like co-leaders in certain in various capacities, but as emperor, I don't know if it's the first time,
Yeah,
but there's
but
been like
it's definitely
co-leadership and
unique. It's definitely the idea that he finally got to this position, and he was willing to give half of it away,
yeah,
and all the implications and risks that come with that.
yeah,
It's not like owning a stock where like if you have majority fucking shares, you have the decisions on it. Like I'm sure that if his brother wanted to mess things up, he could mess things up,
of course.
and that's the risk. And dude, that's a great story, man. Like the power to get what you want but hold restraint is something not many men or women can do. When you get to that level, what was that quote you just used about the
That
absolute?
absolute power corrupts absolutely. Not in
I
the case of Marcus, right?
not in, but he's the exception to the rule. It's like when Steph Curry plays basketball, bro. He's the exception to the rule.
Yeah. So that's why that's why he's such a figure in history, right? Because
Mhm.
this guy, you know, he's literally God on earth. Whatever he says goes, right? And the first thing he does is he gives half of his power away. So that's the first thing that blows my mind about Marcus, right? There's many things. There's more to the story, right? Well, before we do that, let me show. Actually, we have some more comments here. We can pull up
Well,
on the
let's
screen.
let's keep it into like compact parts. finish up with Marcus because we have a lot of
Bro,
content. It's already 25
there's
minutes
a
in.
hang on.
So
There's a lot about Marcus.
yeah,
That
so you're gonna have to you're gonna have to slim it down a little bit, condense it, go to highlights of his career, of his life, career, life, same shit. And then go ahead and then we'll go into Adrian right after this, and then go ahead and tell us what parts of what you learned is instilled into you today.
bro. Okay, so more about Marcus. So I just told you about the whole. He gives up. The first thing he does is he gives up half the power, right?
Mm-hmm.
Marcus was trained in many ways by he had a Antonius Pius was his adopted father, but he was given a mentor, someone to guide him, to train him, which I believed was. Let me see if I can find the guy's name here somewhere. The guy who actually taught him, his teacher. Uh, I don't remember his name right now, but basically, they hire a teacher for him, and the teacher, the first thing he does is he gives him a bunch of books, right? And so Marcus learns. He's given a copy of Epictetus. Epictetus is is in history one of the forefront Stoic philosophers. And so Marcus learns virtue and about Stoicism from Epictetus. He reads his works, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the crazy thing about Marcus and how we know a lot of these things about him many years into the future is the guy would journal, and he wrote down his private thoughts to himself, right? He would just, people have like diaries or whatever. This guy, he would just journal his private thoughts onto paper, and he would, for no one else to see, right? Just so he's talking to himself, telling himself how he needs to be better, whatever. So, bro, just to contextualize this a little bit, imagine this guy is God on earth, right? He's the
Yeah.
most powerful man in the world. You have to understand this, right? Because that's the context of everything surrounding. This is why it's impressive.
Mm-hmm.
What does the guy do? At night before he goes to bed, he writes in his journal about how he needs to be better, what his faults are, the things that he could improve on, to be patient with people. And all of that is for no one but him. He's not writing a book to teach other people. No, this is all his own personal thoughts that he's just getting out onto paper as like a meditative exercise. And the only reason we know about this is because it survives. His journal survives to us to this day through like some accident. He never meant to have those private thoughts. I'm sure he'd be embarrassed that we're reading his private thoughts and stuff to this day, many years later, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually right here in case anyone wants to check it out. It's called The Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. This is a great translation that I recommend. Here, let me flip this so you can see. The Meditations, the Gregory Hayes translation is very good. And so, bro, just reading a couple of things from this, just look at the sort of things he does. The first thing he writes about are his depths. He talks about the people who have taught him in his life, about his mentors. That's the first thing he writes about. He's like, my grandfather Varus for teaching me character and self-control. My father from my own memories and his reputation for teaching me integrity and manliness. So he learned. These are the private thoughts of the most powerful man in the history of the world, and he journals to himself every day about how he can be better. Right. So that's incredible, and that's how we know his story. Right. So just that alone is insane. Also, he gives up half his power. That's insane. Another thing, during his reign, actually, Rome goes through a period of like a plague, right? So, similar to the beer bug that just hit the world, right, in 2020. So
Yeah, beer
imagine
bug.
that, but back in the day, right? Imagine the setting. It's 160 A.D. whatever 170. Marcus is emperor, and Rome is dealing with this plague. There's bread issues, there's liquidity issues. The empire is coming down in terms of like money. There's they're having trouble paying for stuff because there's a massive plague pestilence that's sweeping through the empire. What does the guy do, bro? He goes. What does he do, right? So what would you think an emperor would normally do in that situation, right? Because they're in the palace, they're God on earth. They can do whatever the fuck they want. They have the luxury, the lifestyle, whatever. Meanwhile, the populace is struggling. What do you think is normal? What do you think would normally happen in this sort of situation of an emperor? And then I'll tell you what Marcus does, and you
Well,
see the difference.
I don't know if this is true, right? Because this is all like news information that we're getting through sources. So there's no way for me to hard confirm this. But if I had to imagine, it'd be very similar to the situation that's currently going on with Russia and Ukraine, where there's a lot of information coming out with like Putin, for example, who's like locked in a bunker like off in the world. And then like if he ever meets with someone, he's more than like 50 feet apart because he's worried about getting COVID. So he like they have this super elongated table where he sits
Yes, I
from
saw
side
that.
to side. I would assume that's the normal course of action. Pretty much isolate yourself, make sure you don't get that plague. Pretty much protect the people you care most about. Bring them into the palace in this example with Marcus, and at that point, I would hope that they would try to help the civilians out, like the regular Joes, but most likely it's take care of them first, care of
Right.
themselves first.
So this is what Marcus does, bro. When the plague is sweeping through Rome, he goes through the palace and he sells all the fine jewelry. He sells all the nice, extravagant luxury things so that they can fund programs for the people to make sure that they're good, bro. He goes and he sells the palace's treasures to fund programs for the city.
What a G, bro. What a homie.
Like
Why can't
this,
we get a president like that, huh?
bro. Like you think Biden's gonna go and personally go through and start. It's just crazy, man. It's just crazy because this is not the norm. This isn't what people normally do. He goes
No,
out of his way to sell the palace treasures to make sure that there's food in the streets, that people are eating, that that reduce the suffering of the populace. This is not normal. This is not
no,
normal throughout history. They'll just typically what happens is they go back and they'll be reclined, whatever, and they're chilling in the palace with they have 10 bottles of wine, whatever. They have all the luxuries and extravagances. This guy goes and he sells everything and he uses it to fund the population.
fucking silly, man. I
You know
mean,
what I
I
mean?
mean, it's insane that he does that. And you know what? I wish we had like more. I know there's a whole Wikipedia page on this that has some general information, but I would love to see like the general like people reaction, like citizens reaction to all these different um activities you're explaining, right? Like, dude, imagine a world where like you're a citizen and for all of your life, all your family's life, your generations behind you, they've already had like they've had like very standard rulers or emperors. And then Marcus comes by and you're like, dude, this guy's a homie, bro. Do you think he was getting a lot of backlash for the actions he was taking?
Well, apparently the people loved him.
Really?
He was beloved. Yeah. Um, bro, like let me just read you some of the quotes from Marcus that we can. It's not really quotes; they're part of his private thoughts. Well, I guess it's quotes. It's literally things that he's writing to himself in his journal, right? So just imagine he's God on earth and he's writing things to his journal as he's going to bed. These are the things that he's reminding himself of, right? The most powerful man in the world. He's writing things like, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." These are the private thoughts of this man, right? These are things
Mm-hmm.
he's writing down in his journal. Reject your sense of injury, and their injury in self disappears. Someone insults him or says some crazy shit. He could literally have them killed right there. He's like, bro, the reason they're saying that is because they don't know the good. They don't know good from bad. I know it, so therefore, and I have this power, so it's my responsibility to be good and to not, to be kind and just, bro. He says things like,
Wise man.
"The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." You know
Wait,
what I
say that
mean?
again.
He says the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. So basically, he says
Be better.
the best revenge is to not be that way. You know what I mean? This guy could instantly kill you if you insult him. And this is what he does, bro. These are the things that he's saying to himself.
Dude, he was ahead of his time, bro.
Incredible, bro. Incredible. So that's Marcus, right? He also went off into there was a war with the Germans. He was out with the military up in the front lines, leading by example. So he has a great military tactician and leader in that sense as well. Another, to me, the last big thing that I'll say about Marcus, and we can keep moving,
Mm-hmm.
is during his reign when he's up north fighting fighting like up towards the border with like the tribes, the Germanic tribes that were up in the north. This is Rome, right? This is ancient Rome. There's no internet where you can verify and call somebody up, whatever. Word spreads somehow that Marcus has died. And a guy on like the other side of the empire who was his best friend or something, a great friend of his, comes up and says, "No, I'm emperor now." So starts challenging him to the throne, right? And then Marcus, what does he do when he gets back to Rome and he pulls back with the army or whatever? What do you think he does?
So just to get the summary straight, he was announced dead, even though he
Yeah,
wasn't
there
dead,
was a
because he
rumor
was
that
off
he
fighting
died.
in a rumor that wasn't true, that he was off
Right.
fight, that he was dead when he was off fighting, but he came
Yeah.
back. He sees that one of his friends is trying to take the throne,
Yeah.
and then what does he do from
Which is
there?
treason, right? He literally he's trying to kick Marcus off and try to become emperor. It's literally trying to like, which in that time period meant like they were gonna kill your whole family, you know, all of that, right?
Yeah.
Your whole life is in danger.
Wow. I don't even know what he
What
does.
do you think Marcus does? He goes and he forgives him, bro. He doesn't have him killed. He says, you know, it is what it is, bro. This is what he's like. The best revenge is to not be that way. You know, that those are the things that he thinks of himself. He literally doesn't do anything to him, bro.
And do you know the end of that story? Like, does
I,
it go
I
on?
think the guy is exiled or whatever, but
Oh, okay.
he doesn't like
So
slaughter him or
he still
whatever.
got punished though.
There was still punishment, but it wasn't what you typically expect. You know, he didn't
Yeah.
go off and just and kill him or whatever.
He held back for sure.
Yeah, he just exiled him. How crazy! Like this guy just shows so much
All right.
restraint.
So just wait, hold on. Last little point because we have to start moving. We have to start schmoozing. What lessons have you learned from Marcus that have been instilled from you from a mentor mentee perspective?
To me, Marcus to this day is my biggest mentor. I'm learning from him actively every day. The biggest thing is to understand, and this just ties into Stoic philosophy in general, to understand the things that are within our control and the things that are not within our control, and focus on those that are, and try to be the best person that you can possibly be. He talks about the 4 virtues of courage, discipline, you know, temperance, and justice. I would say,
Oh
what
man,
happened?
did you disconnect?
What's going on?
I think
No,
I
I
think we just
think we're still live.
disconnected.
We're still live. Can
We're still
someone
live,
if
though.
you're in the chat, show a comment. Let us know if everything's still good.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and check as well.
I think we're good. Yeah, it says y'all good.
Yeah, we're good.
Adrian.
We're good.
All right, we're good. Okay, that was weird. Sorry about that, guys.
You're
Anyways,
talking about the 4 virtues.
the four Stoic virtues, bro, of discipline, which temperance, justice, wisdom, and courage, right? And so I think about how do I apply all of that during my life. You know, that's the biggest thing. I just, it's kind of like what would Marcus do? You know how people say like, oh, what would Jesus do?
Yeah.
So I think of like, what would Marcus do, right, in this situation, or whenever I encounter something, right? So that's pretty much it for Marcus. There's a lot more to talk about Marcus, but we don't have time.
That's a
And
whole
so-
episode by itself.
And so let me here before we move on to the next thing. Let's look at the chat a little bit. So remember you asked Adrian who his mentor is.
Yep. And
This is a bit weird. I don't want to share.
Yeah.
No. I don't want to share that. Here's the thing, guys. Before we pull the comment up on the screen, you know, this is something more we could talk about in private. But but let me just put what I did not tell him to say anything. Just saying, okay. Before I have no idea what he was gonna say, right? So this is what Adrian said when Eric asked him about mentors in his life, bro. Let me move the error request out the way so we can read the comment.
I can still read it.
Go ahead.
It says Adrian goes with cheesy but Leroy. Have him give you my story and the way he's changed me. Wow, that's very intimate, bro. Most likely won't be a cop if it wasn't for meeting Leroy. I don't have a celebrity role model.
Damn, bro.
Damn, bro, that's powerful, bro. You got a little stoic in you, bro.
Hey,
but all right. Enough meme, enough jokes, bro. Let's
no
go ahead.
no meme, Adrian. Like I appreciate that, brother. So I'll tell you off stream, Eric, more or less. Another comment here by Brandon Velasquez, Hoodie Lee. What's up, bro? This is a friend of mine.
Yo, what up,
Yeah,
B?
He calls me Hoodie Lee sometimes. And then what? Biden's a clown, bro. I mean, hey, we know, bro. We know. You don't gotta put that out there.
We're just straight flaming out here.
Anyways,
but, let's change it up a little bit because we could keep going off of like who our role models are, and I think that's interesting. But we're already pushing time here, so let's switch the dynamic a little bit. Of what do you think? How do you think we can implement mentorship into our current lives? Whether it's me, you, the general average Joe, to help fulfill our goals and ambitions? Like, is it more of like you have to watch content? Because, like, for example, Marcus, someone who existed 2,000 years ago, you couldn't even find out about him unless you went to a library or you had internet, right?
Right.
Um, so is it the fact? Do you feel like we're lacking mentorship currently in our like global setting? And do you think what's the best way to tackle that if that is true?
I think that I don't think we're lacking. I think history is the best teacher, but I
Hmm.
think that one thing that maybe not enough people are doing is actively searching out those who are where you want to be or have solved issues that you want to have solved and learn from them, right? Just look up people who are doing that and see if you can potentially learn from them. Learn about them, what their story is, and see if this is someone that you could potentially take lessons from, right? Because you can have a mentor about any myriad of areas of your life. It doesn't necessarily have to be, Marcus Aurelius, talking about living a good life or whatever. It could just be as simple as, a mentor for the gym, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that it's probably not utilized enough. I think that people, the way that it typically manifests is having teachers in school, which I don't think is true mentorship, though it could be. But what I would recommend to anyone, for example, who isn't sure about this, I would say, what problems in your life are you having? And look into people who could potentially help solve that for you. Not just with you directly talking to them or whatever, but people who have maybe gone through the things that you're going through and find ways to see if you can implement what their lessons and what they've done into your life, right? Or look up people who you would love to be like, who you think is doing things well, learn from them, and implement what they have to teach you into your life. Um, if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it does for sure. I would say that a little something to add to that, which I definitely agree with, is I think in our current culture, at least for Americans, right? I've come across a lot of people who aren't very open, like fully open to self criticize, right? To self reflect and to look upon yourself or to maybe just straight up listen, right? There's always some backlash. There's always a response and a retort to a certain statement. So if someone gives you criticism, I think the natural reflex of most people is just like sort of like, damn, well, that's not 100% true, right? Like I do this and that, and you come up with a million different ways to deflect, right? And this aspect applies to everything, right? Whether it's trying to learn a video game, trying to learn a sport, trying to improve a skill in general, is just consider yourself garbage. Consider yourself inexperienced. Consider yourself not knowing anything. We're in our 20s, right? We realistically are not that wise. We are not that mature in the grand scheme of life. Realize that whether it's 2,000 years ago, whether it's someone who's alive today, that they have the answers and assume that you're a complete noob when it comes to implementing that. Because for me personally, right, I've caught myself when I was younger, and I still sometimes do it today, where I will start trying to learn something, right? Let's say like the 75 hard example was a perfect example that I saw recently within myself, where I tried to perform the 75 hard method, which is the whole like you have a set of rules, you can't break the rules. One of those rules was you have to drink a certain amount of water per day, which is a pretty high amount, honestly. And within myself, internally, I was already like, well, I don't have to drink all that water. Like I could work around it by maybe working out a little bit more or reading extra chapters in the book as one of the rules of 75 hard. But that's just my own ignorance, bro. That's my own like coping mechanism to not just follow instructions and to learn from people who have done it before. And to bring this back to the whole like mentorship, I think going into it with a whole like clean slate of like whatever I've learned, just assume it's misinformation or bad information, relearn it from the ground up. And if you were right originally, then damn, you just double checked your work. Now you know you're right, right? If you're learning through Marcus, for example, on like how to live your life and you've had these internal dialogues with yourself that are lining up with Marcus, then you double checked your work and you're good to go. But don't go into these like mentorships with the whole idea of like, oh man, I'm gonna listen, but Like, I don't know, I do my side pretty well. Like, I don't think I could take anything away from it. It's just not worth it, man. And so it's a great resource if the person utilizes it. But I feel like that's an issue some people, including myself, have to get over, of like non-egotistical learning.
Yeah, I think it's an ego issue. I think what you're describing is you have to have your ego in check to take criticism and to realize that you're not goaded at everything. There's people that you can learn from in everything. There's always someone better than you at whatever it is that you're talking about.
Do you know a
Unless you're
lot of
Tom Brady, you know, and you're looking for like quarterback advice. Even then, the guy still learns every day, right? Like there's always people for you to learn from. You have to have your ego in check in that, right? Because a lot of people think that, like, if I say, "Hey Eric, I don't like the way you're doing this," or "Hey Eric, you could improve doing this a little bit better. Here's how," and here's my read on that. You know, you might take that as like, "What? What do you mean, bro? Like, no, what are you talking about? Why am I taking advice from you or whatever? Oh, you're trash." Or, they might try and deflect. You know
yeah.
what I mean? One, maybe the real answer is, "Hey, let me listen to what this person is saying and judge it on its merits, as opposed to being defensive about a criticism inherently on its face." Right?
Yeah. Do you think specifically on the whole like ratio of how many people can absorb criticism healthy versus have that egotistical side? Which way do you think it leans more towards
I
on
think
average?
the vast majority of people would would have like an ego reaction, I would say. And I myself in the past, and of course I'm not perfect. Even
Oh,
sometimes still have an ego reaction. You
dude,
know
when
what I
it comes
mean?
to League of Legends, everything out of you is an ego
I
reaction,
think
bro.
because I think the natural way that we exist is with having, like, protecting the ego, like being sure of yourself. You know what I mean? That's just I think the natural human state of being, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we can rationalize the fact that it's not the best thing for a growth mindset, which is what we're talking about here, right? Which is why we're seeking out mentors, which
Of
is why we're
course.
trying to be better, because we're trying to live the best life that we possibly can. And this is something that can help us achieve that. But a lot of times, you know, you might associate your whole life with something that you're doing. And if I come and tell you, "Hey, Eric, this is stupid," now I'm not just attacking the thing that you're doing. I'm essentially attacking you because you're associating it with your person, not who you are. You know what I'm
Yep.
saying? And so, and so that's why people defend with, like, have like an ego reaction where they defend themselves in that sort of way. And I understand why, because I mean that's natural, right? But the key is, can we get past that, right?
Yeah. And you know what? It's fun. It's funny because we're talking about role models and mentors, and to me, the thing that like it always comes back to is like mental health, and mental, I guess more specifically in this case, meditation. Because what meditation does, which I've started implementing in other aspects of my life, is meditation is like the idea of you're going to know your mind's wandering throughout a meditation session, and that's okay for your mind to wander as long as you could recognize it and try to pull it back in afterwards.
Yeah, it's the recognition that's the
It's
key.
And so likewise with this whole egotistical side of trying to self-improve, if you catch yourself in that egotistical like mindset, like I have it sometimes with Rocket League where like I'll hear someone criticizing me who's of like a lower rank, for example, and my first initial gut reaction is like, oh, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about, bro. Like same thing with Rocket League. But if you could recognize in before you talk, before you open your mouth, recognize that's going to be your first instinctual reaction, and just close your fucking mouth until you fully understand. And maybe you ask them clarifying information. You're like, so what specifically about this was I doing wrong? Could you show me how I could do this better? Or what would I do here versus like, as long as you're not instantly shutting it down and you're recognizing that this is an opportunity to learn and get criticism, that's one step forward towards actually like learning, right?
Yeah,
And and from what I understand is look at Marcus, bro. I mean, we keep going back to him because he was the main focal point, but he was he was in the strongest position of power as any one man could be in the world at that point, and he chose to be self-reflective. He chose to be grateful for these things when And realistic, he didn't have to. He could have lived a life of like, haha, fuck bitches, get money.
Literally, he could literally
Like he
have done that, as so
and
many emperors have done before him, and so many did after. Right?
yeah,
That he could literally just be in this hedonistic lifestyle for the rest of his life, not taking any responsibility, whatever. Hire people to run the empire for him as he goes and he, does degenerate stuff for the rest of his life. Instead, he tries to be the best person that he could possibly be. Tries to help as many people as he possibly can. Wakes up in the morning and he says things like, when you wake up in the morning, remind yourself that today you're going to deal with people who are, vile, who are villainous, who are going to try and take things from you. We're going to try and take advantage of you. Remember that they are this way because they don't understand the good. They don't know. They haven't studied philosophy like you have. They don't. So it's your responsibility to do it. Another thing that he talks about that I didn't mention that's incredible, and it ties into what you're saying, is that he gives himself this lesson where he's like, when bad things happen to me, it is not a bad thing inherently. It is just a thing that happens. And then we cast judgment as to whether it is a bad or good thing. So the question is how you see things, not the actual things themselves. So maybe someone else, it is fortunate for such a thing to have happened to me because I can bear it. Whereas if it had happened to someone else, they would have capitulated probably under it. So I see that sometimes where it's like, man, I'll be at work and I'll get a shitty assignment, right? I'll get a rough. I know I'm in for a rough day, right? I'll get a shitty assignment, and literally in that moment, and this is why it's practical. This is why Stoicism is practical. This is why I follow Marcus. This is why he's a great teacher, because it is practical. It's not bullshit that you just think about and you philosophize about. No, it is practical in your everyday life. You can apply it. Marcus goes, it is fortunate that this happened to me, because if it happened to them, they wouldn't be able to handle it. So it's good that it happened to me because I can take it and I can learn from it. He says, fuel, things that happen to you are just fuel for the fire. When logs are turned into are thrown into a fire, things are thrown into the fire, it just becomes fuel for the fire. You grow stronger from it. You know what I
yeah,
mean? He says the obstacle, what stands in the way becomes the way. It is, I'm gonna have a shitty day at work. That's the obstacle, right? So in that obstacle, that now becomes the way. That itself, that I'm having trouble, I'm gonna have a shitty day at work, is what I need, because it's gonna give me an opportunity to practice virtue. It's gonna give me a chance to be better. I'm gonna improve my time management. I'm gonna, improve my skills. Maybe I'm gonna put in an extra 3 IVs today. I'm gonna learn a lot. I'm gonna be able to help my coworkers. I can take the assignment. It's gonna help the unit. It's gonna help the hospital. That's how I think about it, right?
are you able to actually? I understand, like, you're trying to implement it, right? Like, in that moment, you think of it, and you're like, you know what? Use this as a learning lesson. Be thankful that I can take this instead of someone else who's a scrub ass nurse. I get it, like, but actually, through the next 10-hour shift, when you're cleaning up shit off a toilet for the fifth time, are you like, thank God for Marcus, bro? This is another
No,
learning
of
lesson.
course, but that's not what it's meant to be, right? It's
Obviously,
it's of
obviously.
course it's still gonna suck,
Hmm.
but in that suffering and in the fact that it sucks, in my mind, I'm thinking, ultimately, this is going to make me better. Of course, I hate this shit right now. But at the end of the day, when I'm at the end of the shift, I'm going to be proud of the fact that I moved through it and I got through it, whatever, not an issue. When someone else might have capitulated under it. So it's a good thing that it happened to me, right?
Yeah, of
That
course.
that's how I think about it. And
No,
that's how
that's a
Marcus
great point.
that's what Marcus teaches. And he doesn't actively teach this. This is just his private thoughts that he's writing to himself. But we can take these teachings many, many years into the future. That's why the guy's the GOAT. That's why he's my number one, right? Mentor. So, anyways, that sort of covers what I wanted to talk about in terms of mentorship. Do you have any thoughts that you'd like to share here towards the end of the hour? Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think mentorship is a really nice tool if you're able to tap into it and utilize it well. Obviously, it takes a little bit of self reflection and understanding that it's not going to be quick and easy. The instant gratification is not going to be there. Even with this project that we're currently running with the IRL Quest, right? Like, a lot of how we got started is from learning from others and implementing, whether it's our social media strategy, whether it's the podcast itself, the topics we cover, the way we introduce topics. It's all, we've learned this,
Yeah.
and we understand that, like, the number one thing is consistency, right? Which is what so many people fail at, and who knows, maybe we fail along the way. But the idea of like us not questioning it and just doing it instead without making compromises is, I think, the number one thing that like mentorship provides. It provides a tool for you to learn from, where you don't have to use your brain. You could be a follower. You could fully be a follower and just learn, where it's not that hard of a skill to implement, as long as you realize that it's not going to be quick and easy, the results at least.
Yeah, that's a great thing you mentioned. Learning from people who have come before you. Joe
Yep.
Rogan, he put out a bunch of episodes before anyone would give a shit about the JRE podcast. You know what I'm saying?
Dude, he did it
So
for years, and like, dude, if you ever saw his first episode, the way, I mean, he hasn't actually talked about this to say, but from what I understand, he had an episode with like five of his best friends sitting on a couch, and his whole goal, I think, the way I perceive it is like he just wanted to get it started. The easiest way to get it started is having all his boys in a room talking shit, and like that's so like, obviously it's nothing what his production looks like today. It's
of
nothing
course,
what, but the idea was to get started the same way we're just pumping out videos, to get started, and don't worry about the small details. Just make sure that the big details are taken care of, and the rest will come over time.
there you go. So Joe's like a mentor in that sense, right? He could be a
He is,
mentor.
right?
There's
Yeah, for
even
sure.
though you don't know him personally, of course, he's still teaching you things just by his actions. You can learn from him, right?
Yep.
So,
Agreed.
anyways, that sort of covers it all, man. Is there any closing thoughts you want to have in terms of anything else you want to say before we wrap up the stream here?
Well, yeah, I do actually. Appreciate everyone who came on today to give a little shout out, a little comment. Really do appreciate that. I know we haven't actually announced anything yet, but we do plan to have guests on eventually. We'll iron out all those details as it comes out. The goal is to not only express our opinions, but to get you guys involved and to learn a little bit more about yourself. And you could be that third connection for us that is able to open up our minds, or open up our goals in terms of what we're trying to do here at IRL Quest. And dude, I'm just excited to be here, bro. I'm excited to keep working. I'm excited to keep grinding. It's been a pleasure to honestly keep working on this, man.
Hey, I really appreciate that, Eric.
Dude, sometimes you just gotta say it how it is, man.
There you go, bro. Very grateful. Grateful for you. Grateful for the podcast. This is a great, just fun thing to do, bro.
Dude, it's
I
fun
enjoy it.
for
So,
sure.
anyway, of course, thanks for watching. Thanks for joining in live. To the people who are here, guys, this stuff about stoicism is very accessible. It's not, reading ancient text. It's not philosophizing like in school. If you ever taken a philosophy class, it's not any of that, guys. It's very accessible, especially today with modern writers who have, distilled it into things that you can digest easily as a modern day consumer of information. Hit me up if you want to have any more information, talk about Marcus, whatever. You know where to find. The socials are are right there, and we also link it in the description. And yeah, that kind of wraps it up, guys. Thanks from us. Appreciate you tuning in. All right, and keep in touch. We're gonna post on social media when we go live and stuff like that. Okay.
For
So
sure.
thanks for
Been a,
joining in.
been a pleasure again, Leroy.
Thanks, guys. All right, take care.
All right, take care, guys.
Peace.